Hey everyone, this is Shaman from Rocketship HQ, the mobile user acquisition firm that lets you grow in a capital efficient manner. Our guest today is Lomit Patel, the VP of Growth at IMVU. Prior to IMVU, Lomit managed growth at many early stage startups, including Roku, which had an IPO, Trusted ID, which was acquired by Equifax, Texture, which was acquired by Apple, and Earthlink. Lomit is a frequent speaker at different conferences and has been recognized as a mobile hero by Liftoff. Lomit has also authored the book Lean AI, which is a fascinating deep dive into the wild, crazy world of automated marketing. And Lean AI comes out this week. We'll link to that in the show notes, so definitely check it out. In today's episode, we dive into how Lomit and his team run incredibly sophisticated re-engagement ads. We go into why paid re-engagement is even necessary when there are other organic options available. We talk about how to employ re-engagement across very different points of the user journey, how to measure the impact of re-engagement, and we get a peek into the AI-based creative testing and optimization system that Lomit and his team use to drive some incredible performance. This is a fascinating peek behind the curtain of an incredibly sophisticated marketing machine. I'm very excited to welcome Lomit Patel to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Lomit, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Samar, for having me.
Absolutely. Lomit, I'm also excited to have you here because you've already been on How Things Grow. And a lot of the story you told on How Things Grow is about really the evolution and the start you and your team got on mobile from having been a web-only company. And it feels like what we're going to talk about today is going to be a logical progression of that in terms of how far you guys have come since you guys embraced mobile for the first time. And it's so like you to really be at the leading edge today as you were back then. So I'm very excited to dive into a lot of what we're going to get into today.
Definitely. Let's do it.
Yeah. So Lomit, we're going to talk about how re-engagement and retargeting ads can be effective across a user funnel, right? How do you decide what user segments to retarget via ads? Because, if somebody came in, never made a purchase versus somebody who made a purchase, didn't come back for 90 days, these are very, very different kinds of people. How do you decide which one to go after, which one could be better? Because presumably there are an infinite number of segments you could go after.
Yeah. So the way we think about it, and I know a lot of people now are talking about retention, re-engagement, and retargeting sort of being an important part of the entire sort of growth strategy. We've been doing it for a while, right from the beginning, because the way we looked at it is, just focusing on acquisition without retention, or that doesn't make a lot of sense because we're spending so much money on the acquisition side. It's kind of a sunk cost, right? Because that money's kind of gone at that stage. Industry standards, good conversion rates are generally whatever registration rates like 10 to 15%, or conversion rates to like payers being like 1 to 3%. It's very low when you think about it. You kind of leaving the majority of people on the on the table that you haven't been able to like convert. And so our philosophy has always been, how can we squeeze more out of every user that we're bringing in? Because ultimately we've spent that money to bring them in, and if they don't convert, then it's a loss to us as a business. And so our philosophy when it comes to looking at like retargeting is important at a couple of stages where we identify. One is, when somebody sees your ad and kind of clicks on it and comes and installs the app, but then they don't end up registering, that's one segment that we try to go after, because we know they raised their hands, they showed some interest, clearly they didn't follow through, and so we want to try to get them to at least follow through and register. And once they've registered, the second part that we look at, just like a lot of other mobile apps, is you really have this small finite window that we call the onboarding process, which for us is the first 7 days. But we know if we don't get users engaged into the app within the first 7 days and really truly experience the value proposition as quickly as possible, then they're going to be more likely to abandon and never come back. So that's the second segment we focus on, is the first 7 days. And then beyond the first 7 days, the other thing that we continue to track on our users is how engaged they are, or if they have lapsed and have become dormant. And so the third segment we focus on is lapsed users, where we try to do win-back campaigns to continue to try and bring them back into the product and use it.
Got it. And how do you identify that these are the most highest priority users to go after?
Right. So for us, clearly talking about it in order, if somebody has installed the app but hasn't registered, that's like the highest. That is a high priority, because until they register, we can't really do any of the other things that we want we need to do to try and continue to like engage, retain, and monetize. And then after that, a big part of the focus is really the first 7 days. But one of the challenges with CRM campaigns that we find, and I'm sure this probably applies to a lot of other advertisers out there, is CRM campaigns are highly dependent on how many people opt into your emails. And for us, when it comes to email opt-ins, we have double opt-ins because we want people to verify their email, as well as opt into permission, so we can continue to sort of message to them.
Sure.
And so our opt-in rates are okay, but they're not huge, because we have few frictions and barriers. The other thing that we do is, we try to get people to opt into our push notifications. And as industry standards on push can range between like 20 to 40 to 50%. For us, we're more on the lower end of that spectrum, because, a lot of people, again, what we find is people opt in to push after they've actually come into our app and they've actually started doing some behaviors and actions which are more contextually relevant. So, people are more likely to opt in to push in our app once they have started making friends and they want to get notified when their friends are coming back online, or if they've shown interest in different chat rooms and they will know, when there's activity happening in those different chat rooms, or if they're shown interest in purchasing certain items, and when that might be a special deal on that. So those are contextually relevant, and that's when once we hit people up to opt in at those stages, we get a much higher uptick than trying to do it during the onboarding flow. And so for us, retargeting ads are like the best way for us to message users early on, because with retargeting ads, whether they've opted in or not, we could reach the large majority of those users outside of the app.
Understood. And that makes complete sense, just because everybody hasn't experienced the app in its entirety to really get value out of the push or email. So retargeting really lets you cast a widest possible net and actually get these people to start experiencing the app as much as possible, right?
Right, definitely.
Yeah, and how do you set target KPIs, which could be ROAS, I imagine, for different segments of users? Because again, somebody who hasn't registered probably would have a different ideal outcome than a dormant purchaser. How do you think about that?
Yes, as you mentioned, ROAS is definitely kind of the key wearable that we try to track. But based on which segments that we're using retargeting ads for example, when we're targeting people that have installed the app but haven't registered, there's no point really looking at ROAS at that stage. There, we're kind of looking at the conversion rate to getting them to become a registered user, right? Okay. So, and then once they become a registered user within the first 7 days, that's when we start looking at two KPIs. One is the conversion rate to becoming a payer, because within the first 7 days, at least for us, if we can get somebody to make a nominal purchase in our app, whether, because generally what we do is we sell credits, which is IMVU currencies that people buy to redeem against different purchases. And so, if we can get somebody to make a nominal purchase like a dollar worth of credits, then that's the other conversion rate we look at within the first 7 days. And if they don't do that, then the other thing we try to look at is the other way we monetize users is through advertising. And so generally through advertising, we get people to take different like surveys or watch rewarded videos to earn these credits. So, we're able to identify, how we're going to ultimately monetize these users. And based on that, we try to track them. We track the ROAS based on the different two segments that they might potentially fall into.
Understood. So it's almost like you look at the monetization profiles, and the target KPI for them is a function of the monetization profile they're expected to have.
Right. And then with lapsed users, users that have gone dormant, with them we generally try to look at what's we continue to track ROAS, but it's like, can we get them to come back into the app? So we kind of look at engagement rates there.
Understood.
And time spent on the app. Yeah.
Understood. So do you look at the ROAS of your re-engagement campaigns in isolation to say, right, I spent so much on dormant users, let's make sure we make so much back? Or is that also tied with your acquisition budgeting as well?
So generally it's all tied in terms of like how much are we spending and then all of these activities. But we do, to what you were saying, we do look at each of those activities in isolation as well, just to make sure that there's incrementality coming from those different spends that we're doing.
Understood. And that incrementality, it's certainly a phrase that's used quite a bit. Tell us what that means. Tell us why that's important.
What it means to us is that, for every dollar that we're spending, is it actually leading us to find incrementally new users or payers that we wouldn't have got ordinarily without spending that money? Right. And so generally what we try to do, wherever we're spending, we're able to identify what the baseline is based on what that spend is on the different channels or the different activities across, like in this example is like retargeting, because with retargeting we use a couple of different partners. One would be Facebook, and then another partner could be a potential DSP, programmatic partner, that we're using. But the idea, what we try to do is we try to split our audiences up for retargeting. So the ones that go to Facebook, we try to isolate those users not to go to the DSP, so that the people that the DSPs are targeting are not going to be the ones that we are ordinarily going to target on Facebook anyway. Right. And then when we look at the ones that we're targeting on the DSP or on Facebook, we always try to run a control holdout group.
Right.
And then so generally what we do is when we look at the holdout, which are people that don't get exposed to any of these ads, how do they end up behaving, or how do they end up monetizing versus the ones where we are paying? And that's how we sort of look at the delta to come up with our incrementality.
Understood. So it's pretty much a controlled A/B test that you're doing.
Right. Yes.
Right? And the way you describe it, it does take, I imagine, a fair amount of resources. Yeah. So can you tell us what sort of apps is retargeting not right for, if any? Yeah.
So just going back to what I'd said, if you're doing paid user acquisition and you're not doing retargeting, it's already a sunk cost at that stage, right? Because you already spent that money. Yeah. And so if you've already spent that money, and generally the more you're going to keep putting into acquisition, and your conversion rates are still going to be in under 10% at the most, unless you're like doing something that's hugely different industry standard. So you're still leaving the vast majority. So my philosophy is that you should be considering retargeting at least within the first 7 days, because a lot of people aren't going to opt into a lot of your auto communication channels just to try and get them engaged into the app. And then after that, what we try to do is once after the 7 days, we tend to spend a lot less on our retargeting paid efforts and increase a lot of our in-house communication channels. Because by that stage, we get a lot more. By then, we have a pretty decent number that have opted into our push, pretty decent number that have opted into our email. Plus, people are starting to visit the app frequently, so we could use a lot of like in-app messages too.
Understood. Yeah. What I also find fascinating about how you and your team have approached your entire re-engagement effort is you guys have been incredibly sophisticated in identifying users at different stages with users with different personas, and you used AI-based testing for doing creative testing and improving on creative performance. Can you speak to your process of how you have done this AI-based testing?
Sure. So where AI has really helped us, because for the most part, there is so much work, as you mentioned, that really goes into doing a lot of these granular testing and segments, holdouts, and orchestrating all of these type of campaigns. We try to automate a lot of that processes. So there's not a lot of like manual intervention that's involved in orchestrating and executing these campaigns. A lot of that is driven through data insights. And that's the part that we've really leveraged a lot of AI into. So all of our data, where we're spending the money and then how the users are behaving, kind of lives in this cloud storage. And then we try to apply AI into that data to try and surface insights to try and help us to identify what are the behavior actions that users need to take within different stages of these retargeting and re-engagement campaigns that are going to end up leading them to take the best next step, which we describe as the ideal user journey. And so once we start seeing certain patterns that start sort of bubbling up, that's where we sort of take those insights and then try to come up with personalized creatives to try and match those behaviors. And so, for example, for us, kind of mapped out these ideal steps. The first is like somebody has to create an avatar, once they come into IMVU, because if you don't have an avatar, then that's really your identity. Then you're not really going to get to participate in our social network. And then once you're creating an avatar, we always give people like free credits, and we want people to start redeeming those free credits, because the free credits kind of takes a basic avatar and helps you to customize it to your look and feel. For example, the look, your eyes, your skin tone, the clothes you want to wear. And then after that, we know at the end of the day, our key value proposition is really about connecting people and making friendships. So, once they've created an avatar, they've started redeeming their credits to dress it up. We want to start getting people start engaging in our chat rooms, start making friends, and start exploring our different shop to try and sort of see what else there is out there, and start engaging in our feed so that other users can get to know them as well. But it's kind of creating that social viral loop at the end of the day. And so all of our creatives lead people into that loop and continue to get them to rinse and repeat those behaviors.
Understood. That's fascinating. So it's almost like that at the end of, for instance, at the end of day 3, they should have added a friend, but they haven't, and they should have bought certain avatars, or they should have bought certain articles of clothing, and they haven't. Therefore, and that's what your AI algorithms are telling you, because you're like, look, this is our ideal user journey. Users who don't have the ideal user journey, let's show them creative that lets them take that next step.
Right. Perfect. And so another way to kind of look at our AI is basically the Sherpa. It's basically the guide. It's the guide, but the way it does the communications is through the creatives.
Yes. That makes complete sense. And I understand you guys use a third-party AI sort of technology. How do you recommend that marketers think about building the sort of system you talked about in-house versus potentially getting a third-party partner?
I know companies always talk about, build versus buy. And for us, ultimately, the decision to end up going with a partner really came down to the fact that, it takes a certain type of skill set to really build this, and to have that level of expertise in data science too, because it's not like one and done kind of thing, because all of this is just algorithms that continually getting trained by the data, but you still need sophisticated data scientists to continue to validate the model, make sure there's no biases happening in there, that you continue to attract. And so we don't have that level of expertise in-house, which is why we ended up going with a partner. Plus, my personal experience, and I'm sure a lot of other people might be able to relate to this, I've worked at companies where you build a lot of these things, especially on the CRM side, because the common sense is, we can build a lot of these things, which is great. But what people tend to forget is once you build it, you have to maintain it, and you have to continue to iterate to keep it going with best practices. And that's where a lot of companies don't end up putting the resources into maintaining it and iterating it so it continues to stay on best practices. What started off sort of becoming a competitive advantage ends up becoming a liability in the long term.
Indeed, indeed. And that's just because it's not your company's core capability.
That's
so might
right.
as well work with somebody whose core capability it is.
Right.
Indeed, Lomit. Lomit, this has been fascinating. And as always, every time I talk to you, I'm so impressed by everything you're up to. It's amazing to dive into everything you're doing with AI, including what you have done lately to really teach the rest of us about some of the work you're doing in AI. Would you like to tell us about it before we wrap?
Sure. Yeah. So, Shamath, always a pleasure talking to you as well. And everything that I talked about on the show today, plus a lot more. I'm really passionate about the whole area of AI and automation, and how to really leverage that, especially when it comes to startups where you have less resources, but trying to get more out of that. So I ended up writing a book called Lean AI, which is part of the Eric Ries, the Lean Startup series. And it really goes into a lot more details to really provide the roadmap for any companies that are really looking to implement AI and automation to become their competitive advantage to scale and grow their business. And it's available on Amazon. So, love for your viewers to check it out.
Indeed, indeed. We'll definitely link to the book in the show notes. And I'm very excited to check out the book, Lomit. Thank you so much for appearing on the Mobile User Acquisition Show.
Thanks for having me, Shamath. Always a pleasure.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog. Thank you.